Relief for commuters as Prime Minister PM Mottley takes action to fix public transport. That's our top story in your Barbados Today Evening News Update. Thanks for joining us. I'm Fernella Wedderburn. At the height of a strong public outcry about the $3.50 bus fare, Prime Minister PM Mottley today announced discounts for school children and commuters. As she updated the country at the end of an urgent meeting to hammer out issues plaguing public transport at government headquarters with players in the sector, Mottley vented her frustration at the plight facing commuters who endure long delays and poor conditions in bus terminals. First, she announced an ease for school children.
Given the fact that we are in the process of amplifying the Transport Board's provision of vehicles, and that the Transport Board more and more will be a brand as opposed to literally the owner of vehicles, that we will work to be able to ensure that the privately owned PSVs have agreed that they will not charge school children more than $2.50. In the case of the Transport Board buses, that $2.50 obviously is paid by government. In the case of the PSVs that are privately owned, not working under the Transport Board brand, then the school child will pay $2.50. But there is still the obligation on us to have as many buses operating under the Transport Board brand such that the school children don't have to pay anything at all.
Public Relations Officer for the Alliance Owners of Public Transport, Mark Haynes, told Barbados Today the decision to reduce the fare for school children was unanimous. He said several stakeholders were concerned that the fare hike was disadvantaging parents with multiple children.
And that would bring some relief for the parents of the children, who have 2 or 3 children or so like that, there's political considerations. So the Prime Minister listened, and she thought that having been put to her, what she heard in the public domain, that would have probably given rise to her stance to move from her position previously to what now obtained.
Prime Minister Mottley also announced that commuters who buy the Transport Board's smart cards will benefit from discounts that will translate to them paying $3 in bus fare. She also made it clear public transportation must improve on several fronts.
We accept that the Transport Board has to be far more capable of communication. Nobody can tell you that bus ain't a breakdown, but there's nobody holding your tongue. And you can't have a bus terminal where people sitting down waiting for hours and nobody don't know whether the bus coming, going, or never coming. And that people have to open their mouths and speak to people and give people the chance to be able to pick up the phone and beg somebody to come for them, or go across the road to the ZR, or to plan out their lives. But this insensitive nonsense of just not saying nothing and then putting them to stay in somewhere, mercifully, I'm told that by the 2 ministers, that these things are capable of resolution.
In other news, this Wednesday, thousands of former CLICO International Life Insurance policyholders will have to wait a bit longer to get an update on their proposed payment plans as Resolution Life Assurance Company ResLife winds down its operations. Today, government announced that planned town hall meetings to update the policyholders will now be held next month. During the March 20th budget presentation, Prime Minister PM Mottley announced that policyholders and claimants are expected to benefit from a settlement package comprised of a $103 million cash payout and a $300 million in bonds. Minister in the Ministry of Finance, Ryan Strawn, will lead the interactive sessions along with key officials from his ministry, the ResLife Board of Directors and Management. 3 people were arrested in connection with police investigations into a drug seizure at Pegwell, Christchurch this morning. Police from the tactical unit at the District A police station conducted the operation in locations suspected of being used for cultivation of cannabis. During the operation, 308 cannabis plants were recovered from a residence in the area. They ranged from seedlings to 3 feet in height and weighed 5.5 pounds with an estimated street value of $11,000. Lawmen also found a quantity of cocaine weighing 10.3 grams with an estimated street value of $500. An undisclosed sum of local currency was also confiscated. Children in Barbados now have a number to call for help. This morning, the FMH Sandy Lane Charitable Trust Helpline launched a 24-hour hotline which will seek to deliver direct help to children up to the age of 18. Attorney at law and UNICEF champion for children, Faith Marshall Harris, disclosed that the hotline will receive calls of distress and concern from children and calls for help from children, their parents, guardians, extended families, neighbors, communities, schools, churches, and anyone concerned about their welfare.
Let me say that this helpline is exclusively for and about children. However, we want to make sure that the whole community understands that they must call once they have a concern about children. So that will be parents, guardians, their teachers, their neighbors. Once there's a concern about a child, they should call the helpline. This need for a helpline was also inspired by the mandatory reporting protocol that you heard mentioned earlier on child abuse, which I wrote at the instigation of the Child Care Board back in 2014. Basically, and most countries who have a keen sense of what should be happening with children have such a protocol, which mandates everyone who becomes aware of abuse of a child to report it. And our reporting agencies are the Child Care Board and the police.
Unfortunate. That's how President of the Barbados International Business Association, Julia Hope, describes the EU's recent blacklisting of Barbados. In a report published in March, the EU claimed that Barbados had failed to follow through on its commitments. Hope is optimistic that the country's name will soon be cleared by May.
While the OECD appears to recognise how our new tax regime is akin to a rising tide that lifts all boats, it is unfortunate that the European Union has taken a less enlightened stance towards our efforts. Some of you have heard me address this matter in other fora and know that I have used some very choice words to describe how I feel about the EU's blacklisting of Barbados, merely months after the OECD had deemed that our tax regime did not constitute harmful tax practices. However, we are continuing to look forward, and BIBA, through its task force, has continued to support the government in its efforts to get the EU to understand the fullness of what we're doing.
There's regional and international news after this short break.
Barbados Today, news you can trust.
To regional happenings in Jamaica, Prime Minister Andrew Holness reports that the zones of special operation programs have put a dent in crime, and the crime fighting measure will be utilized by security forces in other communities. Holness updated lawmakers on the performance of the program in Denham Town, West Kingston, and Mount Salem in St. James.
In the 577 days before the zone was declared, there was a total of 17 murders, 29 shootings, 2 cases of rape, 3 cases of robbery. Since the declaration of the zone of special operation for the 577 days, 0 murders, 0 shootings, 1 aggravated assault, 2 cases of rape. In Denham Town, for the 532 days before the zone was declared, there were 31 murders, 44 shootings, 2 cases of aggravated assault, 7 cases of rape, 7 cases of robbery, 5 break-ins, and no case of larceny was reported. And after the zone was declared for the first 532 days, we saw where there were 12 murders, 10 shootings, 3 cases of aggravated assault, 9 cases of rape, 3 cases of robbery.
And finally, on the international front, Peru's former president, Alan Garcia, died in hospital in Lima today, hours after shooting himself in the head to avoid arrest in connection with a bribery probe. More in this report.
This was the scene outside of a Lima hospital Wednesday as people learned that Peru's former president, Alan Garcia, had died, hours after shooting himself in the head to avoid arrest. 69-year-old Garcia was one of 9 people a judge ordered to be arrested in connection with a massive bribery probe that has consumed other former Latin American leaders after a Brazilian construction company admitted in 2016 that it had paid kickbacks to politicians to secure lucrative contracts. Garcia had repeatedly denied the allegations. According to the Interior Minister, when police arrived at Garcia's home to arrest him on Wednesday, Garcia told them he needed to call his attorney. He is said to have gone to his room, shut the door, and within a few minutes, a gunshot was heard. Police then forced themselves into the room and found Garcia wounded in the head. Garcia was president twice, first as a firebrand leftist in 1985, then as a champion of foreign investment and free trade in 2006. Members of his once powerful UPRA party announced his death to crowds gathered outside of the hospital, where doctors tried but failed to save Garcia after undergoing emergency surgery.
And that's news, but for the very latest, visit our website at www.barbadostoday.bb. You can also subscribe to our e-paper, email updates, or like us on Facebook, and sign up for our breaking news alerts via WhatsApp. We're also on Izumi Media and bus terminals as well as Screenplay and supermarkets and gas stations near you. And you can also hear us on Mix 96.9 FM and Capital Media HD 99.3 FM. I'm Fernella Wedderburn. Good evening.